had a website, but it was almost like a vanity project back then. Now it is like an entrance fee to have a business.
Good. Hey, I wanted to let you know that the Google guarantee, the Google ads, man, I'm getting 12 to 16 calls a week.
My goal is at least do 10 to 15 more years, grow it up, sell it for 40, 50 million, maybe more.
Today is March 10th, 2023, and my guest is Lauren Fink. Lauren is the founder and CEO of Apex Painting, which started 18 months ago, and in that time has become one of the fastest growing painting companies in the Midwest, with over $1 million in revenue. Lauren is also an active member of the Painting Contractors Association. Lauren, we've been dying to have you on Titan Talks since we started the podcast a few months ago. So it's an absolute delight to have you here. Thanks so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
To get started, would love to hear how you got started in the painting business. If you could go back to the early days, maybe give us an origin story.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have one that's as common as a lot of painters. So for those business owners who feel like they came into something uniquely, I identify with that. So I think that the start is really the passion to own my own business. And I like to think about being a business owner, that decision as having muscles that like you're given that you need to exercise. And I say that because I always had an itch to own my own business. I always felt like I just was built to do it on some level. And then as I started to do it, I felt like I was exercising like muscles I had not ever used, but I already had. And I needed to like train them and get stronger. But I had a lot inherently there. So my instincts over the years of dreaming about starting a small business, I think that you can't ignore those instincts and those that kind of passion and that kind of itch that you want to scratch. And especially if those around you are saying they see that too. I think that is really important. So I spent several years in just brainstorming stage. I also had small kids at home. And so it was very much in theory that I would eventually start a business, and I didn't know I'd really do it, but I like to think about it. And like a lot of things, there were some doors that opened for me to really get more serious about it. And my husband's job changed. So he's not in my business at all. He's actually in public office. And when he got into public office, there were these reasons why this kind of made sense for me. And he was kind of like, hey, I think this might be the time for you to sort of like, scratch that itch, like see what's out there, see what you can come up with. Cause he always knew this was a passion of mine. So I initially started because I live in a rural community in a small town, and you cannot just start. I mean, really, you shouldn't do this anywhere, but especially here, you cannot just start any business and it be around in a year. So I really did kind of some studying and thinking about demand, and the trades was just a really natural fit. I've been a lifelong athlete, and working on site, doing physical work, painting. I have some professional painters in my family, not on the trade side, on the like artistic side. Wow. And so that doing artistic things that are beautifying and also craft have always been very fascinating to me. My dad is a really talented woodworker, and he's a very natural artist. So, and he's the big reason that I started a business. He's like my greatest mentor. He himself was a CEO and a entrepreneur in the healthcare field. And he's like, if you had to point to one thing, it's like, that's the person who I saw myself in him. I saw the excitement and passion that I had for business in him and how he lived that out in his career. And then when I wanted to start business and do things, he was the first one to be like, let's brainstorm, let's come up with a business plan, let me help you with your finances, let's talk about applying for a loan, like all these things. He just had in his back pocket. So you can't ignore the resources around you. And I certainly feel like there's no way to be extremely grateful for the people who've gotten me to where I am. But then you also have to use them and take the leap and do something that seems kind of wild. And I had plenty of people who did not understand what I was doing. So
Sure.
I feel like as business owners, you have to find, I call them like your cabinet. They're like the people that know you and you trust them, and they'll tell you things really honestly. And then you have a lot of other people, and they're going to feel lots of different ways about you. And some of them are going to just be like, why? Like, I'm a mom with lots of children and my husband works a really different job. Why would I want to start a business? Well, the people who know me really well would say like, this makes perfect sense. So I think that that was a driving factor. And then one really, really kind of important moment was so I started my business in May of 2021. And that January, actually, we visited friends, and one of my husband's best friends and my best friend's husband, Travis, he told me on a visit, we were talking business and I was struggling, like, I think I've got to find this perfect business to start. Like, I'm designed to run this one business. Like, what, I got to figure out what that is. And he was the first person to say to me, Lauren, it doesn't matter what business you start. And this was so important because I was just sure that I need to pick the right one and I could really screw it up. And he said to me, you have entrepreneur personality, skills, desires, passion. And he said, you are going to be able to run many businesses, pick one and start it. So I think that moment was really important to give me the confidence to just say, okay, let's walk down one of these roads. So in April of 21, I sat down with our local painter to pick his brain about coming into the paint trade. And what started as I thought would be just some brainstorming and kind of gathering information. I left that meeting with him saying, you need to start this business. I'm trying to retire. There are too many people who need good painters. I don't have anywhere to send my customers. Because of that, I'm not even able to really retire because he felt so bad. He would just keep kind of taking on jobs, and he was in his 70s. And he gave me, he said, come out on my site next week. I'm going to teach you how to do this. And I'm going to give you some tools, and I'm going to give you some jobs. And he in many ways just started to speak this business into existence before I had really like made this like moment where I was like, this is it.
What was his name?
His name is Steve.
Okay.
And he's known here in my town as Steve the Painter. And he's the painter. Now that I'm where I am and I've met so many contractors, I love to think back about that day because I could have sat down with so many contractors and their reaction could have been so different. For me, like, hey, what do you think about me getting into the paint business, into this particular trade? And it just could have been the gamut of like, oh, that's cute, or oh yeah, you should go work in, for 5 years in the paint trade, and then all of these things. And he was like, you can do this, you're going to be great. So Apex started before it had a name because he gave me a customer that he was like, you should take this job, you should go bid this. And he connected me to my first employee. She's about to be with my company for 2 years this May. And the other big moment for our start, and I promise I won't talk too much, was
Great. I'm loving every second. Please.
Good. Was when I interviewed Heather. So she's my longest employee. She's like my founding painter. She's so important. I'm so lucky to have her. But I sat down with her to interview her in May of 21. And she was great. And I'm kind of asking her, like, what do you want in a job? Like, I'm trying to get a feel for what her life looks like and what kind of work she's looking for and how. And she looks at me really seriously and she says, I want to be a professional painter. I want to work as a painter all year long. I want to work as a painter in the summer and the fall and the winter and the spring. And as someone who wasn't in the trade, I was like, what, what is your problem? What is going on in your life? Why have you not been working? And then she, explained to me that all the painters she's worked for pretty much every winter, they don't have enough work. And they're the painter. So they take the work they have and say, hey, sorry, like, I don't need your help right now. And then every warm season would come around and they'd need extra people. And she'd end up working at a factory all winter. And she had a couple of injuries from working at factories. They're really intense environments. And we get a lot of our best people from factories. That's a pretty common job around here. So that was the other thing that when I was sitting with her and I reflected on that conversation, I think that began to form a very core value of Apex Painting, which was that I am passionate about my employees having an incredible employment experience, and that my company doesn't just serve my customers, it serves my employees and their families, and it gives them a better life. It gives them opportunity, it gives them stability. It gives them something, it gives them a career, gives them something that they can really plan and move forward with. It's not, hey, come work for me for a few months and we'll see if there's any work left in November and maybe my company won't even be around. And, all the things that just kind of naturally happen with, I would say, painting is one of the most unprofessionalized trades. So it can have lots of different looks, and that's probably true across the trades, but ours is just particularly at that point.
What an introduction. Thank you so much for all of that. I have probably a dozen questions.
Go for it.
Where to begin? Let's start with, let's go back a second to Steve. You said he showed you the ropes out there the first day, and that you didn't have much background as a painter, family, a little bit of artistic painting, but certainly not professional in the trades. Was there training necessary to become a professional? What other were there courses, education that you had to do in the early days? Would love to hear about the process of you ramping up and becoming a professional painter.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes and no. I knew that my business model from the very beginning was not Lauren Fink painting on site every day. And a lot of business models are. So if you come from a trade background, it's very natural to start your own business and you are the operator. You are the production. Yep. Even the first week I trained with Steve, he was already confused by how much I knew that I wanted to understand things and that I was not going to be painting every day. Because that was his model, and he painted every day and was still painting. And there's nothing wrong with that. My model was different, and I had a lot of reasons for it, but I think the biggest reason, well, one, it wasn't probably the best strategy because I didn't have professional painting experience. So me getting to the place where I'm the lead painter was going to take a lot of time, as anyone knows who tries to master a craft. Secondly, I'm a mom of 5 kids. They are all under age 14. And my husband has a very full-time job, and our family life is very important. So I knew from the beginning that I wanted to have a business and even a startup that was not life consuming. And that was very hard to do. I will not pretend that my first year and a half especially was not a little too consuming. I think it's pretty hard to do a startup without it sort of taking over your family time or your personal time. I would say that I pushed the bounds of gathering information, resources, hiring, delegating, and trusting my people so that I was not the expert from almost the very beginning. So Heather came in with 4 years of painting experience, and I learned from her. I learned on site with Steve. And then I did tons of research. So that first 4 months was probably, I was on site working every day with my team. I was also out selling jobs. And then I was just on the computer, just picking apart everything I could to understand the craft of interior and exterior residential painting, from the coatings to the process to prep to how you organize your trailer to just everything. And then all the business side as well. Why am I pricing it this way? How do I make any money? How do I manage my labor time and costs? How do I manage material costs? It was a very jump into the deep end approach. And the only reason, I will just say this, I might have a real knack for this. So there's some of this that has to be true. I'm also an extreme people person, and I can sell anything. That's because I just love life, and everyone I talk to, I just love talking to them. I love their home. I love their animals, their family. I'm so excited to do their paint job, and that comes naturally. I don't have to put that on. That is a huge help. The other part is that the demand in my area was so high, is still so high, that as a startup, I was able to jump in, not have everything dialed in and really perfected, and get lots of jobs. This is not the case in every market. And so that atmosphere, that climate here in this market, I think that had to have been one of the biggest factors for me jumping in without a lot of experience and just learning as we went. So I think that answered your question. I'm trying to think what it was.
Yeah, that's great. Talking about pricing, I mean, you said in the early days, there's so much that you had to learn in 4 months. But I imagine some things, as you just alluded to, were and maybe are works in progress, where you started with something and it's evolved over time. How did you decide on pricing initially? And then how has that changed? And we don't have to go into specifics, but just, I would love to wrap my own mind around, starting from scratch. How do you pick a number?
Yeah, you start by Googling it and coming up with what you think other people are charging. And then you've got like your basic payroll numbers. At that time, try to think about my first job. My first job was a complete shot in the dark. I looked at maybe 3-4 interior rooms, and I think I priced it at like $2,200 or $2,000. And it seemed insane to me. I felt like an insane person. I had never hired professional painters. So the idea that I was going to ask them for $2,000 to paint this room, this hallway, and this bedroom, I think it was about 3 elements, and a stairwell to the basement. I was just like, they might like shut the door in my face and be like, because it did not feel natural. I did not have any instinct about pricing. So that was kind of hilarious. But they said yes, and we got our first job. And we probably didn't make any money on it, but we made some money because I didn't price it at like $800, thank God.
Yeah.
So over time, pricing was actually an adventure for me. I think that naturally you try to figure out what you can do something for, and you have all these ways of trying to basically forecast, how is this going to go? So that was one reason I wanted to understand and be on site, is I really need to understand our production pace. And so I have to see it and feel it and be able to look at it and imagine how it's going to go. So from knowing nothing about professional painting and substrates, that was a steep learning curve, but I spent a lot of time that summer doing just that. And then you get to test it out. Luckily, professional painting is such a quick turnaround on a residential level that you price it out, your guys go do it, and you go, wow, we were $1,000 off. There you go. So then you could, if you can learn quickly and make those adjustments, then you get to try it again. And if you're not too far off, you have enough money to keep your company going. Then in about July, I found Nick Slavic, Ask a Painter Live. And I began watching
Nick
some of
Slavic.
his.
Just a shout out to Nick, past guest of the show, episode number 1.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
And
Nick,
a friend of mine and someone I admire. There aren't words to describe how much what this guy does is like, he's really setting an example, whether it's your trade or his trade, our trade, or another, for being a leader. So started to watch some of his videos, and honestly, I was like Googling every word. I didn't know what anyone was talking about. I mean, it was at that level of just, I'm lost. We're talking about painting. We're talking about business. I don't know this word. I don't know this term. And then he said in that episode that I was watching this one day, someone asked a question and he went, guys, you know that your labor costs cannot exceed 40% of the price of the job, of your revenue. And I was like, what? I had not been pricing that way. But I took that simple, what's so great about him saying that is that it is the most simple concept that you can apply with one painter, just one painter, one guy who runs a company by himself. And today this winter, we've averaged about 70K in revenue a month. I have 8 full-time employees, and that 40% labor cost is still it is a critical metric to everything we do every week. It has never stopped being relevant, or it's like, so he mentioned it and it happened to be, thank God, it was like, it's probably the most critical metric. I think he even says this, if you're doing nothing else but keeping labor at 40% of your revenue, you basically have a business. You can survive. Things will happen. You will make a little profit, or at least you'll be able to grow your business. You won't go under. That was a huge turning point. I connected with Nick. I connected with the PCA, and I was a PCA member at 5 months old, which I'm very proud of because the PCA is incredible. So for us painters, the PCA is our National Trade Association, and it's full of resources. It's full of community. It's full of honestly just encouragement and inspiration. That's what I love about it. And then it has like really hard factual data stuff that's great for your business. And so I was a member at 5 months old, and that alone, between connecting with Nick and the PCA, which have a lot of crossover, that's the only reason I'm on the track that I am on. The whole learning curve changed at that point because I had, at a very early stage, the best resources that you can have as a paint business. I had them in my back pocket as fast as I could learn and read and watch videos. And I went to his master's class in November, drove to Chicago, and sat with a bunch of awesome painters who had 10 times more experience than me, and asked a bunch of questions. And then I went to Orlando that February or March. I went to PCA Expo and was with hundreds of painters. And I was not even a year old. Those jumping into resources and community, it just takes you to a new level very, very quickly.
It's amazing anytime you can find one little tidbit, whether a sentence or a few words that completely transform your life, your business.
Yeah.
It's amazing how powerful small little tidbits like that can be. I had not heard of the 40% rule, and I'm glad I have. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Sure.
Thinking back to your first customers, would love to hear, how'd you find them? Was it through Heather, your first employee? Did she know people? Was it advertisements on Google, other stuff? How'd you get those very, very first customers?
First ones, I want to say the first two might have been directly from Steve. So he's been painting here for over 30 years. So the people who called him on a weekly basis was just his return customers, and his name recognition was so high that he was just eager and excited to send customers over to me. One of his proteges who worked under him and now owns his own company, he's a colleague of mine in the sense that he runs a paint company here in Hillsdale too. Austin Waters, he sends them to him. Austin's more of a 1 to 2 man shop, and I've always run with 4 or more painters. So the demand is high enough that Steve, I think at this point, he sends people to 3, I want to say probably 3 different paint companies that he trusts, us being one of them. And we still get referrals from him. So at the beginning, those referrals were powerful. I immediately had yard signs, and I immediately had a Google profile. And for the first maybe 9 to 10 months, if I'm counting that right, maybe it was 9 months, that's all I had. I had yard signs, I had a phone number on there, I had my Google profile with reviews, and I had word of mouth. And when you're in a small rural community, word of mouth is very powerful at a level that an urban environment doesn't typically support. I did create a social media profile pretty quickly. I'm trying to remember, probably within the first 9 months as well. But I think those factors I mentioned first were probably where we got all of our summer work that first year. And yeah, so if that answers the question. Then I went into social, both Facebook and Instagram. I still don't think that those are huge drivers of customers. I think they're good. They allow customers who are calling in to see more dimensions and get to know your business. I think there's some, but I don't think it is not my strongest lead source. And then coming around the time of Expo, actually my first Expo in 2022, that's when I started to look for a website designer. And I had thought about this and not come across anything I was interested in doing. And then I'm trying to think timeline. I actually saw a Slavic Ask a Painter with Nick from then ProPhone, which is now Topline Pro, was all I needed, because the description and just getting to know Nick, as in Nick from ProPhone and now Topline Pro, I was so exhausted. I was running on fumes and trying to get through a long winter, trying to get into spring. I had gone through 2 foremen. And for me, the most important hire in my business was my leader in the field, because I was not going to be the one who brought the field experience. So that person, and Heather has been that person on and off, but we pretty quickly realized that although she can fill that role, she's better being more of like a lead painter on a crew versus the person sort of with all the pressure designing and running and making decisions in the field at a project manager or foreman level. So I saw that interview with Nick, and then I just said, look, I cannot spend any time on this website. I had no bandwidth to do some sort of design process, like let's get in touch with our feelings, like what colors do you want? Do you want this stripe to be like this? Do you want it to look like that? Do you want like a review page that integrates with your blah blah blah? I had no patience, like there was no room for it. I was really at a very just like I don't know, just it was just a time where I had to focus on other things and I didn't have any steam for it. So I called Nick at then Profone and I told him this exact thing. I said, I want you to design this website. I don't want to tell you anything. I want you to make it look the way you think it should look and use your expertise. And I'm not picky about it. I don't care if this page is first, if that's, please put the elements you think are important. I really just need a website and I need it to not cost like $4,000 to just design it and hope that like it's what I need. And the whole business model of Topline Pro being this ongoing kind of caretaking way of handling your website and your domain it was such a perfect fit. I cannot describe to you how much that was a win for my company at that exact time. I don't see how it could be not a win at almost any phase, but at my most stretched and sort of burned out time where I needed something that was a huge value monetarily, but also not a time suck. And when you're a business owner, you're just so aware that your time is just, it's so valuable. You only have so much bandwidth, you only have so much capacity, and then and you have to use it so wisely. And there's so much pressure to make sure you're using it and the right way. Nick took that, I signed up with him. I had a website in 24 hours and it looked awesome. That was the crazy part, was I probably had like 3 words I wanted changed. That was literally it. Like, and I gave him very little instruction and he brought a lot of just knowledge about wording and how this will help SEO. And we're going to do this domain. Here's the domains that are available. Here's what I recommend. Here's how we're going to do your email. And he set it all up. It was so painless. It was so affordable. I was like, I don't think I've ever loved a brand more immediately. So I'm like a really insane fan. You have to just, just have to realize that when you are at that point and you need something and you find a company that meets your needs so perfectly, you are like, you're stunned. That was not my expectation. I did not think that existed. And as I talk to other business owners, they have the same experience. When I tell them how my website was designed, how that worked for me, they are literally like, what does that mean? They're so confused by this whole concept. And I'm like, yes, you should call them. Like, this exists and this is the company that does it. I mean,
is there anything you wish we offered that we currently don't, or are we really at the 10 out of 10 level in here?
For what you guys do, you're absolutely 10 out of 10. Now, do I wish like your business brains and engineers were in other businesses that I have to deal with? Yes. Yeah. Like, you guys should get into construction and become a general contractor. I would love to work with you.
Run that one by Nick and we'll see what he's.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just not blowing smoke. I love talking about this because it was, and I know business owners who hear this will really understand how when something comes through, when you have no more energy to use ingenuity and like figure something out, and something comes through as and over delivers and brings you exactly what you need with very little pain, the gratitude it's immense. It starts to feel like those moments got me through my 2022 because it was a long, hard year.
How has the value prop of the website changed over time? Is it generating more and more leads for you? Is it mostly a sign of professionalism? What do you see the value of the website as?
Well, first, I think the value is as much as you want to make it. So what I love about the website right now is that over the past, we're like a little over a year using Topline Pro. Um, my involvement with the website, uh, I think I could put it into a total of like 4 hours in the entire year, which is not necessarily good in the sense of like, I could be using this more. I could be interacting with more. I could be more, whatever. I could put in strategy and effort. The thing I love about that is that right now I have a lot of endeavors in my marketing model, and there's a lot of things on my plate. And I know my website is serving me and my customers beautifully. And it does everything I need it to do on a very basic foundational level. And then, so yeah, I get leads through it. When I talk to people who are considering giving me a call, they will say like, oh yeah, I glanced at your website and it was so helpful. Like I loved seeing those photos. It also generates, so when we're trying to come up in where we fall when you Google painting in Southern Michigan, the fact that I have this website that's always running and is steady, that allows my customers to find me. So it's doing all this work and it's not really even at its like fanciest stage. So I love that foundationally, it's doing everything I need right now. And then as I get out of, so I'm in another year, we grew by about, well, revenue wise, we grew by 600% last year.
Holy
Um,
cow, that is outstanding.
That's because I hired the right field leader. And that is the power of hiring great people who do things better than you do as the business owner. And I heard it, and then I have experienced firsthand that wisdom, which is like every hire I make now at this point, especially in leadership and administration, is someone who will do what I do better. So 600% last year, and this year we will go from about 650,000 revenue annually to about, at minimum, about 900,000. But we have the capacity in our organization, our systems, our administration, our leadership to do about 1.5 million. So maybe we won't have the energy to ramp up quite that high, but we're in growth, and growth is extremely time consuming. It's hard work. It eats all of your cash because you're putting it right back into the company. So your cash flow is at just heightened management, which, as you know, in the trades, we're always in heightened cash flow management by nature. So for this year, I know that I'm probably not going to do a lot of finessing with my website beyond what it is. But I also know that Topline Pro is going to offer some ways for me to subscribe for them to do some things for me. So as I'm working on my marketing budget for the entire year, which I have to have done by Q1, was one of my quarterly goals, I get to consider these pricings from Topline Pro for, this small amount a month. We will do some Google ads. We'll, do blog post writing for you. We'll, basically optimize SEO or all these little things. So from where I sit, I feel like those are all the kind of options that you dream of having. Marketers have, they can do a lot of damage in the trades. The trades are full of people who did not work. They often are unfamiliar with things like marketing. It's not something that, my guys who are in the trades and other contractors I know, they have incredible breadth and knowledge. Something like marketing, how it works, what you should be paying for, what the results are. I think it is very far out of their natural knowledge and experience base. If I'm being really harsh, I guess I could say that I think there is opportunity for marketers to take advantage of the trades in I would say, kind of an unethical way. Maybe that's because I've seen some of that. And I would say one thing I appreciate about Topline Pro is that I find that efficiency and value are forward facing for Topline Pro. And you don't offer every like gadget and idea and this add-on and this thing and that you possibly could. It has continued to be streamlined. And streamlined tells me that Nick and Topline Pro are constantly thinking about what their customers really need, not everything they could possibly have. That tells you about the ethics and like the core values of an organization. So as I've watched painters interact and do contracts and work with marketers, I would say that in the trades, you should be very wary of marketers. It should be a very slow process and decision because there's a lot of promises and you can feel very desperate as a contractor that you need to increase your leads. You need to, I mean, you've got a lot on the line. So one thing I loved is when I FaceTimed or Zoomed with Nick last, because I didn't know the back end updates to the website because I didn't have to. Honestly, I think this is like the craziest part of my of our company partnership is that I've been out of the loop and your company has done its job for my company, regardless of how in touch I have been. And I almost feel like that's like sort of a mark of excellence. I'm not very proud of it. I'm embarrassed, but at the same time, I think if we're honest about our bandwidth as business owners, that's like kind of awesome. So when he was showing me the back end on all the new options, I just continue to think value for your customers is high priority and in a streamlined options that only you need. So those are just observations I have being in my industry. I'm a big networker. I talk with other painters a lot, and marketing options are a big topic. Once you get a little bigger, if you're doing over 500,000 in revenue a year, you have to talk and think about marketing. You're usually not generating all of that organically, unless you're just doing it really slowly over time.
I'm curious as we look to the future, there is a little bit of that there, but where do you see business in 5 years and in 10?
That's a great question. I love that. 5 years, I think I'm really looking forward to the stabilized phase of having a business. And I've taken a very aggressive fast track approach to starting up a business and getting it to a place where I, as the owner, am not needed for most of its daily functions. I've hired and delegated almost all of those functions out, and I still hold on to sales and estimating. That's my last, like first, that's the last thing that on a daily basis, this generates revenue for my company. I have to be there. Besides just general leadership. But again, I would not say, I think most business owners understand the difference between that and like being in a level of operations and revenue driving. So in 5 years, my hope is that I have a stabilized, maybe $2.5–3 million company that is sort of built like it's enjoying the fruits of the labor of the first 3 years. So I love challenges, but I would say that for the first time in my life, I'm super excited about something that is not like the steepest uphill climb. I definitely took on by starting a business, probably one of the most complex challenges I could have found. And I am very excited about getting to sort of enjoy that stabilized phase and have a little more of a less like crazy, risky, wild, but like anything, the crazy, risky, wild first few years are also full. Oh my gosh, they're full of so much fun. And they will not be replicated. It's like starting a family. Like the stories you have when you had your first baby, like you don't want to go back there, but they're hilarious. And that time is like, it's honestly the morale and like the spirit of your whole family is built during these crazy early years. And that's how it feels. A company is so much like a family for me. The importance of culture and morale and accountability and alignment with what our core values and what we're doing. It's like it's very funny how those are, for me, they're very parallel.
You mentioned early on that you had sort of an entrepreneurship gene. You always wanted to do it. You knew that, other people sort of saw it in you. Is there something now that you've been doing it for a year and a half, almost 2 years, that is most important you've learned to being a successful entrepreneur? And then also, like, what is it inborn? Is it something you picked up as a 3-year-old? Is it your family and friends? Where did it come from?
Good questions. So at this point, okay, your first question was, at this point, what are like the most important elements of entrepreneurship? Okay, I think the number one thing is, let's just start with vision. If you don't have a vision for why you want to do what you're doing, that's foundational. So coming in with an idea of how I believe this business would work and why I was passionate about doing it the way I was going to do it was really important. But then the next thing I think that entrepreneurs have to have, and those of us, like I'm innately built this way, but I have also had to like draw on this strength, which is like fail fast. You have to want to fail fast. You have to kind of love pain and failure. If you love it, you will be aggressive in learning fast, because if you fail slowly, all of your pain is drawn out and your lessons are slow in their cadence. So you're learning like these things once, every few months, versus if you are open to failing fast, you are aggressive in that process, you will grow I think in many ways that's a really big key to growing a successful company. It takes a lot of stamina, but it also takes just a lot of optimism and passion that you know where you're going, and you're going to give it all you can. You also I never at any point, even today, you don't know that this is going to work. You have to, I'm not risk averse. If you're risk averse, you probably shouldn't start a company. It will terrify you. You don't know. You're willing to say, like, let's do this really hard thing. Let's give it everything we've got. Let's get the best people on our team. Let's blood, sweat, and tears, the good, bad, and ugly. It's always harder to do things as a team than to just do something on your own where you don't have to deal with anyone's personality. Give it everything you've got, and then still know that even if you did all of that right, it could still fail. That's what starting a business is. If you don't feel that real risk, then you probably you're either not understanding what a new business is like, because it's like there's some level of rolling the dice in your marketplace, in your time and place, to just say, will this stick? Will it work? And I was there. There are ways I can argue that I am still there. We are succeeding, but we are on a business plan. If we get off that plan, my company is going to fail. It's not in a for sure place. That's not how a 20-month-old business goes. So that's probably That's probably the biggest thing. And then the second thing I would just say, I think entrepreneurship is a lot of this weird balance between getting lots of good information, having tons of resources, experts, mentors, reading, asking questions, reaching out to people, being aggressive about, you do not just become like when I connected with Nick Slavic, I sent him a message. I was like, hi, I'm Lauren Fink. I'm starting a paint company. I am so appreciative of you. I want to connect with you. Like, I didn't do that because I'm a big deal. I did that because I want Nick Slavic to help me. I want him to know who I am. And so that confidence to say, I need the best people on my team. And now Nick Slavic is a person I can call any day. Like, I can call him on the phone. And I'm not saying that's the way it always goes, but it has to start with you pursuing mentors and experts in a way that you really believe you're worth, like, you're worth them being able to give back to you. You're not just a kind of like idle observer on the side, hoping that you kind of catch a little bit. So there's all this like resources and getting information, and then you're balancing it with, at the end of the day, if you're an owner, you are making all these decisions completely by yourself, and they have to be yours. These things are kind of in conflict because you're trying to get a lot of opinions, and then you're trying to shut all of that off and say, I'm going to make this decision. Only I know what my company can do and needs. And I always say about paradigms, like, let them fight. Like, let it fight. Don't ever stop the fight of getting information, feeling like, I want to do what Nick Slavic says, or I want to do what my mentor says. I want to do what this business owner said. I want to have all that feeling, and then also cut it all off, say it doesn't matter what that person thinks, and I've got to make my own decision. That's probably one of the hardest parts about being on the island of business ownership. You asked another question.
I think you may have touched on it, but just, is it inborn? Is it a product of your family and friends who you were around as a 3-month-old? Where did it come from?
Yeah. So, I mean, in my mind, vocation is about taking what you've got and then running with it. But we all know that, like, some of the best athletes or best, they're such an easy example. They have some of it naturally, and then some of them made it happen. So then you have people who just, they just worked harder. They just gave, provided themselves those skills. So I think it can be both, but I think ideally, if you can, you take what you're given. You've got all these natural things you're given. You're predisposed to be like this, your personality, your gifts, your talents, your passions, and you see where they align and you try to run with that. And that's where self-awareness, self-analysis, having that cabinet of people who believe in you, who can tell you true things. You can say, I think I'm an organized person, but I have people in my life who will tell me, Lauren, you're not organized. I know you think you're organized and you've gotten more organized, but you're really an enormous mess. So am I going to then take a job where I think I'm going to teach everyone organization of, like, tidiness and how to maintain, whatever it is, doing mundane functions over and over every day perfectly? No, I'm not the person for that. So doing all of that and continuing to hone in on where should I be and why, I mean, that's vocation. It's like a calling mixed with like a desire. And sure, isn't everyone's goal in their life to find their vocation? And some of us get lucky enough, blessed enough, and it works out that we get to work in, like, I think for me, this is a dream vocation. Will I always get to do this? I don't know. Was this ever going to actually happen? I don't know. The cards were right, the timing was right, and it worked out. So I think it's still the thing to strive for. And then I think there's an awareness that sometimes circumstances in life and your dependence and your who's depending on you can limit how far you pursue every dream and every avenue. But I would say the idea of continuing to try and see where you can fit that in. I think a lot of what we're limited by is just our own, like, I can't do that risky thing, or I can't take that chance, or I'm not good enough to do that thing. Um, there's a lot of that's really easy to feel like that it's overcoming, things. So I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah.
No, it is. It was really nice. Do you mind if we end with a rapid fire round, a boom, boom, boom?
Sure, let's do
Okay.
it.
What's your goal? Why are you doing all this?
I think number one, I love helping people and serving people. My family, there's a lot of this tied to my family, and of all my kids, I have one girl and 4 boys, and there's a reason I got into the trades, because most of my kids are going to be well built to be a part of my business. So find something to do that your family, if that's your goal, can be involved in. Why do I do it? I mean, I think, again, we were designed for good work, and this, in my mind, wouldn't want to spend my day any other way. So that's super satisfying. And then the outcome is I also love facilitating people and setting them up for success, whether it's in my family or my business family. I want to create something that sets people up for success, uses their talents at the highest, and gives them, then you've set them up so that they can then use their talents and ingenuity in their circumstances to bless others. So, that's that's kind of a long answer.
Good. What's the biggest mistake you've made so far?
Oh, that's great. That is so good. I don't have a lot of regrets. I'm not a person who really lives in regret. So that's an interesting one, because most of the time I want to say that mistakes were really important. So I'm not sure I want to say like that it was a bad thing.
Oh no, you learned. I'm sure you learned a ton. But
okay, biggest mistake in the business.
yeah.
Oh gosh. I make mistakes every day, so this shouldn't be that hard. But the biggest one be taking on a customer that I knew that I really should have said no to, but I'm stubborn and I wanted to be the one contractor that could work with them. That probably sums up in some dimension where my biggest faults lie.
Is there a job that you are most proud of?
Ooh. I love working with customers who are, I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm working on refining my core values. And the other day for my team meeting, I played the ZZ Top song. I thank you, which is like, you didn't have to do what you did, but you did, and I thank you. And it's basically, it's basically about like a woman, like pleasing a man. But I was like, guys, this is customer service. This is what I want every customer to sing when we're done. Like, you didn't have to do what you did, but you did, and you did. And I thank you. And so I think the customers where I absolutely love it when I think there's something about an elderly woman who lives alone, who sticks her neck out to get some work done by a contractor, and she's trying to feel out if they're trustworthy. And then we go into her home and she realizes that we deeply care for her. We're people she can trust, because she could be easily taken advantage of on many levels. And then she feels like we have been a great blessing to her. And it doesn't really matter what size job. Those customers that are vulnerable, and maybe they're not as savvy or as anyone who's vulnerable, I feel like when we do them right and we bring value to them and we care about them, those are my favorite jobs.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for being a part of Titan Talks. It's been a real pleasure and an honor too to get to chat with you, Lauren. And gosh, just so much fun to hear about your journey, and I wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me and letting me prattle on so long. I hope it's beneficial to anyone, and keep doing what you guys do and setting the bar high.